The Super Bowl halftime show just gave America and our children the middle finger. At the same time, another stage was used to honor faith, modesty, and true unity under God. We didn't just see two halftime performances. We witnessed a spiritual war on live television. One celebrating rebellion against borders and God's order, and the other standing up to reclaim America's godly heritage. Today, we're going to spiritually dissect what happened this weekend, but first, let's get into the facts. The official Apple Music Super Bowl halftime show featured Bad Bunny, a Puerto Rican rapper known for wearing dresses, joined by Lady Gaga, Ricky Martin, and Cardi B. It was framed as a celebration of Latino heritage, performed almost entirely in Spanish, waving flags from multiple Central and South American countries. On the surface, it looked like a celebration of unity. He waved flags from many Latin American countries, flashed messages about love conquering hate, and even said, "God bless America." But then quickly went on to name and bless many other countries as well. That can sound nice at first, like he's including everyone, bringing people together. But here's the problem. When you try to include everybody equally without any distinction or loyalty, you actually unite no one. True unity requires shared identity, shared values, and shared boundaries. When you elevate foreign flags and identities on America's biggest stage while staying silent on or even subtly attacking the very laws and enforcers like ICE that protect our national identity, you don't build unity. You quietly tear it down. It was a false unity. One that looks loving and inclusive on the outside, but in reality promotes division by downplaying or even rejecting the very things that make America a distinct, unified nation under God. It's kind of like this. You can love a lot of people to some extent, but if you're married and start saying these other women are equal to your wife, that they all hold the same place in your heart, that's not going to make your wife feel special, valued, or united to you, is it? It's going to make her feel diminished. It's going to create distance, not closeness. And that's exactly what happens when a nation tries to treat every outsider and every foreign identity as equal to its own citizens and its own heritage, without any distinction or priority. It doesn't build unity. It quietly erodes it. Messages flash across the screen, like the only thing more powerful than hate is love. Personally, I agree with that statement. But we differ greatly on what love actually is. Love has boundaries. It is not boundaryless. The performance included same-sex dance pairings, heavy twerking, and men grinding on each other, all on the biggest stage in the world. In contrast, Turning Point USA's All-American halftime show streamed live on YouTube, Rumble, and TBN. It was headlined by Kid Rock with powerful performances by Brantley Gilbert, Lee Brice, and Gabby Barrett. TPUSA didn't just pick any performers. They chose country artists for a deliberate reason. America was built on hard-working, blue-collar men and women, and the NFL hasn't had a country headliner since 2003, which is over 20 years ago. They wanted voices that would speak directly to everyday Americans watching football, voices that represent traditional masculinity, patriotism, and family values, the exact opposite of what the official halftime show was pushing. So they brought out Brantley Gilbert, a rough and tough guy who's lived a hard life, overcome alcoholism, and turned his story into a testimony of redemption. He's also someone who's consistently gone above and beyond to support the U.S. military and first responders. Lee Brice, another strong masculine voice, who debuted an unreleased song called Country Nowadays, and included a line that cut straight through the cultural noise. Little boys ain't little girls. That moment alone was a quiet but powerful stand for truth. Gabby Barrett, a talented Christian woman and mom who sang One of the Good Ones, a song about finding a man who's good to her all the time, not just some of the time. It's a kind of message about real committed love and manhood that our culture desperately needs right now. She also stood out as the perfect example of class and elegance, dressed modestly, radiating pure confidence and genuine beauty. She's exactly the kind of woman that we should want our daughters to look up to and emulate. Someone who shows that real femininity doesn't need to be sexualized to be powerful or attractive. And lastly, they brought out Kid Rock, the headliner. And honestly, I think it was the perfect choice to anchor the show. His real name is Robert Ritchie, and he's been a rock and country icon for decades. Someone who came up from nothing, lived a wild life, and now speaks openly about faith, family, and loving America. Kid Rock was the choice that shocked most people. As John Root explained on X, there seems to be a lot of confusion and backlash, especially from the Christian community, about Kid Rock's performance during TPUSA's All-American halftime show. I believe I can clear things up. Kid Rock started his set by performing Ba Wata Ba, which came out in 1999. It's a vulgar song referencing topless dancers, drinking, crooked cops, bastards, etc. Hearing that was a shock to a lot of us, rightfully so. It felt worldly, which I believe was the point. Next, there was an acoustic set with two people playing a Christian hymn. It was meant to be an emotional bridge to what came next. Finally, it transitioned to Kid Rock, his stage name, being introduced back to the stage as Robert Ritchie, his birth name. He then played a revised version of Till You Can't, which included lyrics about Jesus Christ. He also spoke about Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, encouraged people to follow Christ and to read their Bibles. This was supposed to be an artistic way of portraying a redemption story. I don't know Kid Rock's walk with Christ, but he used this moment to point people to Christ, and I rejoice in that. I agree. Even though he had a bad past, that doesn't disable biblical truth from being shared. He wasn't trying to act like a pastor or someone you should follow. He was simply saying, I have a past just like everybody. And that's why we should all give our lives to Jesus before we can't. I thought it was a beautiful and creative way to share the gospel message. Anyways, these weren't just random picks for performers. They were intentional. A statement about the kind of values and role models America still hungers for. The response was massive. YouTube hit a peak of 6.1 million concurrent viewers, now the most watched U.S. live stream in history. Total views from across platforms surged past 25 million in a day. That reach shows a deep hunger for patriotic, masculine, family-centered content that still points people toward real values and redemption. Now, let's talk about what these two shows actually represented. Bad Bunny's performance, clearly a response to ICE and border enforcement, leaned into a borderless, multicultural vision that downplayed American identity and gave the impression that open borders and illegal immigration should take priority over enforcing our laws. He's openly defied border protectors in the past. At the 2026 Grammys, he shouted ICE out. And he's made comments showing he's not the biggest fan of America. The All-American show answered with national pride, traditional roots, and family-first values, clearly putting America and American families at the center. That difference in priority is what stood out. One blurred or erased boundaries, the other, without ever saying the word border, unmistakably put America and American families first. Where one show felt like it was speaking more to the world than to America, the other spoke directly to American families, with pride, modesty, and godly values. Where one had women twerking and dancing provocatively, the other showed that women have class, that they are beautiful and elegant without becoming sexualized objects meant to provoke lust. Along with the hypersexualized dancing and provocative moves, Bad Bunny's lyrics were deeply explicit. They were in Spanish. Most didn't understand every word, but that doesn't change what was said. Those words were poured directly into the ears and hearts of millions of children watching live. Proverbs 18:21 is clear. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits. Words carry spiritual weight, whether the listener understands them or not. These lyrics weren't neutral. They were cursing our children, planting seeds of lust, rebellion, and sexualization right in front of them. And yet, many still call it family-friendly, but it was anything but family-friendly. Now, let's address the immigration message that Bad Bunny was standing for. One of the topics the church is too silent on. First, let me be very clear. We should not be against other cultures coming to America. When people come here legally, respect our laws, and become part of this nation, they bring beautiful diversity and real strength to our country. That's something that we should welcome and celebrate. But we cannot put the interests of those who come illegally or the idea of open borders ahead of our own families here in the United States. That's not love. And that's not justice. And that's not what the Bible teaches. 1 Timothy 5:8 puts it plainly. But if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Yes, this verse speaks about family and our immediate household, but it also gives us a clear biblical pattern, a principle that applies to everything in life, including how we should approach things nationally. Just as a father is responsible to care for and protect his own children first, a nation has a responsibility to care for and protect its own citizens first. That doesn't mean we hate outsiders. It means we have an ordered love. We start with the people that God has placed directly under our care and responsibility. Now, I know that this can pull on the heartstrings, especially for women, for people with Hispanic or cultural family ties, and for anyone who has seen loved ones deported or separated. Those stories are very real, and they hurt, and they make us feel compassion, and that's not wrong. But the American people have been deceived into thinking that love is purely kindness and acceptance, no matter what, no matter the cost. And that's just not biblical love. Biblical love has boundaries. It protects, it provides first for those God has entrusted to us, and sometimes it says no, or not yet, or not this way, so that the household and the nation can remain safe and stable. Compassion without order becomes chaos. And chaos ultimately hurts the very people that we're trying to help, including the most vulnerable in our own communities. A completely borderless vision, one that treats national boundaries as unimportant or even immoral, creates real harm. It weakens a nation's ability to protect its own citizens, to provide security, to control crime and trafficking that crosses borders, and to maintain the stability our families depend on. When borders are erased or ignored, the people who suffer most are often the most vulnerable inside the country: our own working families, our children, and our communities. Scripture calls us to care for the stranger and the sojourner, but it never calls us to remove the very boundaries that God has allowed nations to have. Ordered borders are not unloving. They are part of a structure God uses to provide safety and flourishing for the people He has placed under our care. So when a major public event promotes borderlessness as the highest virtue while downplaying or even mocking lawful order, it's not neutral. It's a message that has consequences for our families, for our nation, and spiritually. That's why this isn't just a cultural or political disagreement. There's a deeper spiritual dimension at work. When rebellion against God-given order is celebrated so publicly, spiritual forces are involved. Forces the Bible describes as territorial spirits that seek to promote division and lawlessness. Ephesians 6:12 tells us that our real struggle is against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. What we saw on that stage was more than a show. It was a public alignment with that spirit of division and chaos. And when these spiritual forces work through people and events to promote lawlessness, like the borderless rebellion celebrated in Bad Bunny's performance, they directly attack the God-ordained structures meant to protect us, such as borders and immigration enforcement. That's exactly why agencies like ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, exist. ICE protects borders, enforces immigration law, and removes those who enter or remain unlawfully, so that families and communities can live in safety. This is not a modern invention. God Himself was the first one to establish borders and strict entry requirements. Even heaven has boundaries. No one enters illegally. To come into God's presence, you must come the right way, through Jesus Christ, our only legal ticket, and we see that in John 14:6. God wants many people to enter, but there is a gate, a standard, and a background check of the heart. That same principle of ordered access and protection is reflected on earth. The Bible shows God repeatedly establishing similar rules and structures. People and groups specifically appointed to guard boundaries, control entry, and remove threats or unauthorized individuals. We see this clearly in the book of Nehemiah. After the walls of Jerusalem were built, Nehemiah appointed guards at the gates and commanded them to shut the gates before the Sabbath and not open them until the Sabbath was over. He stationed people to stop merchants and foreigners from entering with goods on the Sabbath, and when they tried to sneak in, he personally confronted them and drove them away. These gatekeepers function very much like border enforcement. controlling entry, enforcing rules, and removing violators to protect the city and the people. We also see it with the Levites, whom God appointed as gatekeepers of the temple and the tabernacle. Their job was to guard the entrances, allow only authorized people in, and stop unauthorized individuals, even priests or Levites who were ritually unclean or out of order, from entering the holy place. They were armed, organized in shifts, and under strict command to protect the boundaries of God's house. Even in the conquest of the Promised Land, God commanded the armies of Israel not only to conquer, but to drive out the remaining nations and not allow them to stay and live among them. The armies, and later the judges, were God's instruments to enforce these boundaries, removing people who did not belong, protecting the land's integrity, and preventing the corruption that came from unlawful mixture. And right back at the beginning, after the fall, God placed cherubim and a flaming sword to guard the way to the tree of life, physically preventing Adam and Eve and anyone else from re-entering the garden. Even in the spiritual realm, God used armed enforcers to maintain a boundary and keep unauthorized access from happening. The pattern is consistent throughout Scripture. God creates order, sets boundaries, and then appoints people or forces to guard those boundaries, control who enters and remains, and remove threats or lawbreakers when necessary. People are welcome to come legally in obedience to the governing authorities God has established. When people enter illegally, though, bypassing those God-ordained structures, real dangers follow. Drugs flooding communities, sex trafficking exploiting the vulnerable, and even hidden networks that could even involve satanic ritual abuse. All right, guys. Well, if you're thinking this next part looks a little different than before, it's because you're right. We had some technical difficulties last night, and the lighting is different because it's the next day. I had to redo this part. Anyways, back to what I was saying. Since 2021, border agents have recorded over 10 million illegal entry encounters, most at the southwest border. Many of these individuals had serious criminal records or outstanding warrants. They weren't just crossing, they were bringing danger with them. Cartels take advantage of weak enforcement to smuggle thousands of pounds of fentanyl, a drug so deadly that just a tiny amount can kill, into American towns, contributing to tens of thousands of overdose deaths every year. Human traffickers exploit the same routes, tearing thousands of helpless women and children away from their homes to be horrifically abused. These crimes destroy families. Drugs kill sons and daughters, and trafficking exploits the vulnerable and shatters innocence. When enforcement is strong, these criminal networks are disrupted, weakened, and forced to reroute. That's why ICE exists. Not to target immigrants who follow the law, but to protect American families, to stop criminal pipelines, and to uphold order God intended for nations and households alike. In closing, Sunday night we saw two visions for Americans' future. One promoted lawlessness, division, and boundaryless chaos, and the other stood for faith, family, and ordered love of country. Charlie Kirk said it well. The Super Bowl is America's greatest stage, the world's greatest stage. It should showcase the best of who we are, the values we want to pass on to the next generation, not division and not rebellion, not a slap in the face to our country. Let's protect our children, support those that secure our borders, and pray for revival. Anyways, thank you guys for listening. If this spoke to you, please like, share, and subscribe because it really helps the channel out. God bless you, and God bless America.